and maybe as Klaus Riede was suggesting, why don't you put the link of the free software in the chat so that everybody can see.
I'm doing it.
Okay, very well. So we are 20 minutes late, but this is the purpose of this conference as well, to have conversations. And when conversation starts, I prefer to let them go and to, instead of being so precise with the timing. We have a lunch break, and we'll steal time from the lunch break as well, and so we'll have we would have done everything we need to do this way. So the next presentation is Da Silva Cerqueira Aline. Sorry for the misspelling, maybe. Cerqueira Aline. And the title of the presentation is At Sea, Acoustic Tracking of Seabirds, Exploring the Soundscapes of Highly Mobile Predators During Foraging. So, Aline, are you with us? I see yes. You already see your screen. Everything seems to be going well.
Yeah,
but
so
we don't see
is everyone...
your image. Here it is. Here it is. Okay.
Can everyone hear
me?
We
just test the audio. Yes. The audio seems to be fine. So please.
Okay, so first of all, yeah, well, the last presentation is a tough act to follow, I must say. The presentations this morning have been absolutely great. And let's begin by presenting myself. My name is Aline Da Silva Cerqueira. I am a PhD student at King's College London, and jointly with the Institute of Zoology of the Zoological Society of London. And the presentation I am doing today is part of my PhD work, and it is about acoustic tracking of seabirds and exploring their soundscapes at sea. So first of all, a very brief introduction about seabirds. They are everywhere, and they are present pretty much in every environment around the world, coastal and marine environments. And they are very well studied and compared to other groups of similar importance in the marine environment. And they are also very threatened compared to other birds. In fact, seabirds are one of the most threatened groups of birds in the world. And among these threatened groups of birds are albatrosses, which are the group I studied in this part of my PhD research. So while they are very well studied, they are difficult to study at sea. So in the past couple of decades, maybe past 3 decades, we have been using a variety of GPS and telemetry tags on seabirds. So we know where they go, when they go, and how long they spend at places. But when we use these types of tags, we are getting information from one individual at a time. And also, although we know where they go and how long they spend in these places, and we can guess more or less what they are doing, we don't know exactly what they are doing and whether they are interacting with other birds of the same or different species, other animals of different species, and with human activities. We know that seabirds, they are victim of bycatch all over the world. In fact, albatrosses, they are depleting in numbers drastically, pretty much all populations also around the world, and that's due to competing for common resources, feeding resources with fishing boats. So as these birds, they have excellent smell capability. So when these birds see and smell the smell of fish, or when they see fishing boats, they usually associate that with food, and they go straight to these fishing boats, and they often get trapped in the hooks and a variety of fishing gears. So that results in thousands of seabirds being killed by incidentally every year. And that's obviously a massive conservation problem, because combined with other impacts, such as invasive species in islands and coastal locations, climate change, pollution, etc., it means that these animals are under huge pressure. So in order for us to try to protect these animals, we need to find ways to find out what exactly they are doing at sea, when they are doing at sea, and what happens. So that's tricky, because in the past, researchers used to use survey methods such as direct observation from boats or aeroplanes, and these are actually quite expensive. So using tags like biologging devices offer an opportunity for us to explain other ways of monitoring these animals when we cannot see them. And then audio recorders are a great opportunity for us to investigate what they are doing. And using audio recorders can have, therefore, a high conservation value in conservation research of seabirds. So with this in mind, we decided to try to combine audio recorders, animal-borne audio recorders, with GPS trackers. That way, we can find out where animals are and what they are doing by listening to the sounds they are producing and the sounds of their surroundings. So we explored three main research questions, and we ended up with quite a few other questions. But initially we had these three research questions. So can audio recordings provide a high resolution information that can inform us about what seabirds are doing at sea during foraging? Can they offer an extra layer of information that will complement movement data and let us know exactly what seabirds are doing in terms of duration of activities, whether animals are moving faster or slower, they are engaging in shorter or longer bouts of activities, and what is the relationship between sound recordings and activity duration? So we explored these questions. And before I move on to what we found, we'll introduce you to my beautiful species. So we collected data from wandering albatross and black-browed albatross from Bird Island, which is a tiny island adjacent to South Georgia in Antarctica. And we did that because we were supported by British Antarctic Survey, which allowed us to collect the data and directly from the colony. So we tagged the individuals that were rearing chicks during the breeding season of 2015. And then as birds were getting ready to leave the colony to go foraging at sea, we attached our devices carefully to their backs, and then they went to sea, where they spent up to 5 days each time, and allowed us to collect quite a lot of data. So with regards to the devices we used a Dick Mini Tiny Solar, which is very light with good length of battery life, and also good storage capability and sampling rate. And we use, I got 2 GPS tags. In the case of the GPS, we remove the case the outer case, so they actually don't look as nice and tidy as this white picture. So we use only the interior part of the GPS tag, because that is lighter and is much smaller. And it is very important that we use very light equipment, because obviously we attach this equipment onto the animal, and we don't want the animal to be very uncomfortable, or worse, we really don't want to interfere with the ability of foraging at sea. So we captured the animals by hand, and the handling time didn't exceed 8 minutes. And then we recovered the devices when the bird returned from their foraging trips at their nests. So that was within 6 days, basically. So once we got the data, it was time for us to then to download and start the analysis. So I must also emphasize that when I came to this PhD, I had zero experience with sound recordings, acoustics, and seabirds. So I used to work with marine mammals before. So it was a very steep learning curve for me. So I decided then to learn about sounds by listening to the sounds manually. So I literally listened to all the data I collected, and I analyzed my data visually and auditorily. I used WavePad Master's sound editor to do that, and I used the amplitude of sound as my primary attribute for sound detection, and I will explain the reason for that better in my next slide. So the next step, once I listened to the sound, was to basically locate those sounds in space and time. So that was when I linked my sounds to my spatial data from the GPS, and I created a variety of GIS maps. Then I described my data in R, using simple descriptive statistical analysis to basically look into frequency of sounds and mean values, etc. And then I also created a model to assess the behavioral responses to sound types and bout duration. So in this next slide, you can see, I'm not sure if this is going to work, so I'm going to play these sounds. Hopefully it will work. So as you can see from this slide, I've got 5 general category of sounds, which I use throughout my my work to understand what my albatross birds were doing. And as you can see, it's straight away in the flight spectrogram and wave wave plot, you can see that it differs quite a lot from the other plots. So and that's because flight differs a lot in loudness. It is a very loud sound, and I could extract flight from the whole audio data straight away just by spotting that pattern, which repeats regardless of individual and the species I have studied to date. So because it is very continuous and it is very constant and very loud, it is easy to separate flight. And then I was able to then look into greater detail into the sounds that were produced when the animals weren't flying. So let's listen for a few moments, these sounds. So can anyone confirm if you could hear that?
Yes, We do.
Awesome. Okay, so now the sounds that were detected of other birds that were present around the subject bird. So most of the time, these sounds, they were very different, and while flight sounds were very easy to detect visually, the other sounds, they are not very easy to detect visually. So I had to listen to them carefully to gain a better understanding of what the birds were doing. Sorry. Sorry about the technical problem there. So now let's look into some of my results. So I got a lot of data because my audio recorders, they were set to record sounds continuously. So in some cases, the battery of the recorders wasn't long enough to cover the whole journey. But still, I got in total 654 hours of audio data recorded. And I not only, as you can see from this map, I was able to identify areas where my seabirds congregated with other seabirds. So these are areas where I could detect auditorily that there were quite a few birds out there. As you can also observe from the map, most birds, they stayed close to the island, and that is only natural because birds, they would try to avoid going very far away and spend a lot of energy searching for food and then go back to share the food with their chicks. So they try to stay more local. But then I had one bird that traveled a long distance, and I captured sounds in the first part of the journey and towards the end of the journey. So one of the most exciting findings of this research was to be able to pinpoint through sound where birds get together with other birds. And why are they there? Are they there because they are foraging? Are they there socializing? Are they there doing all this together? So in blue, you can see the blue dots, they represent water activity sound. So it is also important to clarify that albatrosses, they are not great divers. So they feed superficially. So all the foods that they are feeding on are foods that are basically located on the sea surface. So we hear loads of splashing and paddling and quite a lot of water activity when these animals are feeding. Obviously, I can only infer that, guess that they are feeding, but if you observe from this map, a lot of locations where birds are congregating with other birds is also the locations where I have found quite a lot of sound activity. In this other map, I'm not sure if it is too confusing. So yellow, orange, and red dots, they represent areas where all bird categories have been identified. So in these locations are locations where 3 or more activities are happening simultaneously. So say that I could hear water sounds, or the subject bird, which is the bird with the tag vocalizing, and the vocalization of other birds as well. So these are hotspots for acoustic behavior that I was able to identify. And it was interesting to observe a difference between wandering albatross and a black-browed albatross in terms of acoustic behavior. So wandering albatross spent longer period of times on the sea surface. So it was also on the sea surface, when the bird was on the sea surface, that I was able to detect sounds from the individual recording the sounds, and multiple birds and tapping, scratching, and water activity. When the animals were flying, I couldn't hear anything other than flight sound. So it makes sense, therefore, that wandering albatross presented more recordings, more sound recordings than black-browed albatross. So in terms of duration of activity bout, an activity bout is when the bird spends a certain amount of time doing one specific activity. We also found out that when animals were in the presence of other animals, or animals vocalized, or they were performing some water activities, the bout activity was longer as well. So these plots, I'm not sure if they are confusing. So on the left-hand side of these 4 plots, you've got flight, and on the right-hand side, you've got rest. So the blue whiskers, they represent wandering albatross, and the red whiskers, they represent black-browed albatross. So you can see in all these plots that the difference that these sounds make to bout length regard of wandering albatross is more significant compared to black-browed albatross. And that could have been due to the fact that wandering albatross spends more time on the sea surface in the first place. And moving on. So some final considerations here. So first of all, we thought that acoustic tracking presents a great opportunity for us to explore the soundscapes of seabirds, and for us to also get information, refined information about seabird behavior. We noticed that some sounds were more frequent than others, and the most frequent sounds detected was tapping and scratching, which is a bit odd, but tapping and scratching is related mainly to preening behavior. So that's the bird grooming its feathers, or trying to perhaps to get rid of the tags that are attached to them. Maybe they felt a bit uncomfortable or something. We also noticed that there is quite a lot of level of noise, which is mainly resulting from windy conditions. So that is the downside of using these miniature recorders on animals that are volant animals. Aline,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you go to the conclusions? We are a bit late.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what we're going to do next is to continue to do acoustic tracking of more seabirds. We have an ongoing seabird soundscapes project on Zooniverse. We are going to use the classified data to develop a machine learning methodology, which we're currently developing. We are also going to try this methodology on other marine animals, and we are very much open to suggestions and further collaborations. So if anyone would be interested to find out about seabird soundscapes, I can share these link on the chat. And before concluding my presentation, I would like to thank, first of all, Professor Almo Farina for accepting my last-minute submission for this Congress. I also would like to thank my supervisors, collaborators, and research funding from NERC. So thank you very much for watching. I'm sorry for being over my presentation time, and I welcome questions and comments.
So thank you, Aline. I apologize for interrupting, but it's my role here also to remember to everybody to stay within the 15 minutes. Otherwise, we'll not have we not have time to start the discussion and the question and answers after the presentation. This is the case, unfortunately, because we went to 25 minutes already. So if there will be questions, I ask the participants and the panelists to give questions in the chat list, and maybe Aline can respond to them directly. Okay, so I'm sorry, but we